And good morning, everyone. Whether you are joining us here at Hainan University or participating remotely, a warm welcome to today's special academic lecture. And I am Dr. Hongdan Zhang, a faculty member at the School of Physics and Optoelectronic Engineering at Hainan University. Our school is embracing exciting opportunities, particularly with Hainan's designation as a free trade port. And this inspires us to foster a more inclusive academic environment by inviting distinguished scholars from around the globe to share their insights. And today, we're deeply honored to host Professor Joseph H. Hamilton, a world-renowned nuclear physicist whose pioneering work has yielded seminal contributions to heavy ion physics, the discovery of new elements, and advancement of international scientific collaboration. After receiving his PhD in physics from Indiana University in 1958, Professor Hamilton joined Vanderbilt University in the same year, where he has forged an exceptional career culminating in his appointment as the Landon C. Garland Distinguished Professor of Physics in 1992. Professor Hamilton's academic influence extends worldwide. He has held guest professorships at prestigious institutions, including the University of Frankfurt, Tsinghua University, and the University of Strasbourg. Beyond his research excellence, he stands as an architect of global scientific cooperation, having founded and directed major consortia such as the Joint Institute of Heavy Ion Research at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, University Isotope Separator at Oak Ridge, and the University Radioactive Ion Beam Consortium. As a remarkably prolific scientist, Professor Hamilton co-discovered elements 115, 117, and 118, authored over 1,150 publications in nuclear physics, and penned influential textbooks including Modern Atomic and Nuclear Physics. He has organized 13 international conferences, delivered more than 450 invited research talks across 30 countries, and nurtured generations of talent, mentoring 64 PhD students and over 100 postdoctoral researchers. His extraordinary achievements have garnered widespread international recognition, earning him numerous prestigious honors, including the Alexander von Humboldt Prize, the Flarev Prize, the Prize for International Cooperations in Science and Technology with the People's Republic of China, and the Prize for International Scientific Cooperation from China. He was elected as a foreign member of Academic Europea in 2020 and received the American Physical Society's Mentoring Award in 2016. Today, Professor Hamilton will share his insightful presentation, Path to International Scientific Recognition for Students and Universities. Drawing upon his vast experience in research and mentorship, he will illuminate the crucial steps toward achieving prominence on the global scientific stage. His unique insights will undoubtedly provide invaluable guidance for aspiring scholars and research institutions shaping their futures. In recognition of Professor Hamilton's profound contribution to today's academic discourse, our school has prepared an honorary certificate as a token of gratitude. And now, please allow me to present this citation briefly on behalf of our institution. And this is the certificate of participation. To gratefully appreciate Professor Dr. Joseph H. Hamilton for the valuable contribution as a speaker at the first International Frontier Science Forum of the School of Physics and Optoelectronic Engineering at Hainan University. And next one is the certificate of the participation. Here.
Oh, thank
Okay,
you.
and these two certificates will be formally delivered to Professor Joseph Hamilton later. And now, please join me in extending a very warm welcome to Professor Joseph H. Hamilton.
That's the first one. Go to the second one.
第二张，Yep.
That one. Hold that one just for a minute. I want to say something that I had not planned on saying, but it occurred to me I should do so. You need to know something about my background. I was born in the middle of the Depression in the United States. I grew up in that Depression era in a little town with 2,900 people. A small high school. My mother taught me all 4 years of mathematics. I didn't even know what the word physics was when I finished high school. I went to college to be a math major. After getting all my math credits out of the way, they told me I had to have a minor, and physics was a good minor for a math major. So I took physics as a minor, and I got so enthralled by it that I became a double major in physics and mathematics, and physics became my lifelong source. Now, what I want to talk to you about, and the reason for my saying that first remarks is don't let anything in your background prevent you from following what you want to do in life and how you want to succeed. I have listed 6 paths to international scientific recognition that I have followed in great detail. The first says to seek to do research that will open new windows to view the world. When I graduated with my PhD in 1958, my research director told me the following. He said, Joe, you can spend your life writing good physics papers, even very good physics papers, but they don't make any difference. They amplify what's already known, but they don't open any new windows to do research. What you need to do is to seek and to find occasionally those points of those research developments that will change and open new windows to view the world. And I want to talk about 2 or 3 ways in which, in fact, my research has opened new windows. The second one, I'll just want to highlight what the steps are. Persistence and determination are the keys to success. I will come back and talk about that. University and political leaders must be open to strongly supporting new research outside the normal. If you want to advance on a worldwide scale, you need to get your university, you need even to get political leaders backing you to provide the resources that are necessary to open those new windows. Finally, you want to develop at your university a group of graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, and faculty at your university and nearby institutions. You will see that a good deal of my research has been in cooperation with Oak Ridge National Lab, which is about 180 miles away from where Vanderbilt University is. But we've had a lot of success with cooperating with Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Finally, you do want to develop international research collaborations with scientists from other countries to jointly publish together. I have had major scientific cooperation with Germany, with France, with Russia, with Poland, with China, with India, and smaller collaborations with some other 15 or 20 countries in the course of my work. But those are what expand your outlook and expand your views and expand the world's view of what you're doing. Finally, organize international research conferences in your area of research. I have organized now something like 15 different international conferences that have been attended by people from around the world, and I will say a little bit more about that. Well, so I'm going to draw from my own experiences in each of these areas to demonstrate their importance. Okay, the next slide. In the late 1940s, people realized that certain numbers of neutrons and protons, namely 2 and 8 and 20, to some degree 40, 50 and 82, 28, 2, 8, 20, 28, 50, 82, and 126, gave a great deal of stability to a particular project. So that if you tried to pull a particle out of this 126, it took a lot of energy. But if you had one more particle sitting up here, it took very little energy to pull out. There was an energy subgap in here that made these nuclei particularly stable and those just above it relatively stable. And so these were called magic numbers, but nobody could reproduce them. This was one effort to reproduce them, and very soon after 50, they failed to reproduce any of those. Mayer and Jensen, in their infinite wisdom, Mayer in the United States and Hans Jensen in Germany, made a proposal that was unique at the time. People already knew from electron energy states in atoms that there was a coupling between the spin and the orbital motion of the electrons. Well, supposedly there was a spin and coupling between the orbital motion of the protons and neutrons inside the nucleus. The trick was when they first tried that and used the same sign as in the electrons, it didn't work. But the next slide, please. Go to the next one. No. There should be one in between. It got lost. What's the one just before this? No. Yes, excuse me. I'm sorry. This is what I wanted to say. I will use this one. What they discovered was that if you change the sign of the spin-orbit coupling, eureka, what happened was that you could reproduce every one of the magic numbers. That is to say, for example, this orbital split into two, and it was the splitting of that orbital into two subshells that gave the 82 magic numbers. Mayer and Jensen shared the Nobel Prize in Physics for the discovery that changing the sign of that spin-orbit coupling reproduced all the magic numbers, and these nuclei had particular stability. Next slide. At the same time, Bohr and Modelson were working in Columbia University. Rainwater at Columbia University noted that a lot of atomic physicists had discovered that nuclei between a 0 of 50 and a Z of 180 of 82 had electric quadrupole moments. That is to say, they had to have non-spherical shapes to have an electric quadrupole moment. And he suggested to Bohr and Modelson that they should look at not the spherical nuclei, but deformed nuclei. And this is a picture of what Bohr and Modelson model look like for deformed nuclei. You have a prolate spheroid that looks something like this with a symmetry axis and a circular picture through the center of the orbit. And this prolate system can rotate about an axis perpendicular to the symmetry axis. And this gives rise to, in the Bohr-Modelson model, to very low energy states with spin 2, spin 0, 2, 4, 6, etc. In addition, however, they also predicted that nuclei you could push on the sides up and down. And if you did so, you destroyed the spherical symmetry here, but you could generate a band of states that they called gamma vibrations, in which the spins were 2, 3, 4, 5, every state changing by 1 unit. And they predicted also if you pushed in and out on the ends, pushed out here and you pushed out there on the 2 ends, come back again, that you generated something called the beta vibrational band. And this had spins of 2, 4, and 6, quite different from the gamma vibration. I'm not going to talk about the octopoles. Next slide. Well, with that picture, this was the picture that one had. One had the double magic spherical nuclei, the near spherical nuclei, the sort of soft, squishy nuclei, and the hard, deformed nuclei that Bohr and Modelson. These are the two that Mayer and Jensen had talked about explaining and understanding. The next slide. Okay. Now, come back to that other one just for a minute. Come back one. The one that just, if you looked at the transitions out of these things, they could decay to the ground state band, the rotational members of the ground state band. What was discovered by our own group and by a group at Oak Ridge and a group in Denmark, that when you looked at the predictions of the Bohr and Modelson model for the relative intensities of, say, the transitions which were allowed by E2 transitions to the 4 plus, the 2 plus, and the ground state, that they did not, the relative ratios of those three transitions did not follow the Bohr and Modelson model. This was a serious problem for the model. And so people finally realized that, well, they could come back to the Bohr Modelson model. And if you took the 2 to 2 transition, this transition from the 2 plus state to the 2 plus state, and you allowed the previously forbidden M1 radiation, the magnetic dipole radiation, you could explain the transition probabilities. And people thought that these large M1 admixtures in the 2 to 2 or the 4 to 4 transitions would bring back everything in agreement with the Bohr-Modelson model, the next figure. We were part of 3 different groups that first discovered that those 2 to 2 transitions had something seriously wrong with the model. Well, Bohr and Modelson was the invited speaker on nuclear shapes and structure at the International Conference on Nuclear Structure in Tokyo in 1967. He said, well, the situation now looks promising with these new M1 admixtures. You can bring an agreement with the branching ratios. But the crucial measurement is obviously the direct determination of the M1 contributions in these delta I, no change in spin transitions between these states. Tentative evidence against the expected M1 transitions has been submitted to this conference by Hamilton, Ramaya, my graduate student, Whitlock, and Muhlenberg. He said, I cannot judge the finality of these measurements, but I must emphasize that if these M1 intensities is not found, we face a major crisis in the application of the rotational relationships to these nuclei. In other words, the simple Bohr-Modelson model was not sufficient, and one had to go to something else in order to explain the relative transitions out of those nuclei. Well, we repeated our measurements, other people repeated our measurements, and all of us found the same thing. There were no large M1 admixtures. It was a major crisis in the simple rotational model that Bohr and Modelson had put. And so what happened was that people had to start, Dashwan Feng being one of the people who did these kinds of things, to create more microscopic models in order to explain the structure of nuclei. And so here again was an example of how we had moved forward on creating measurements that indeed changed the whole structure of how we viewed nuclei. Okay, what's the next slide? This is the simple angular correlation system which we used with 2 detectors, one rotating around the other one, to measure the M1's transitions. This was set up by my colleague Ramaya. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we move on to the second topic. Calvin Coolidge once said, nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated failures. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. My wife says that I'm sometimes so persistent that I take it from being a virtue to being a vice. But persistence has been a key component in my success in everything that I've done. And I want to give you some examples of that kind of persistence. Okay, let's look at the next slide. In 1969, Oak Ridge.
Joe?
Yep.
You may want to remind people who Calvin Coolidge is.
What?
You may want to remind people who Calvin Coolidge is.
Oh, he was president of the United States. So even presidents recognize the importance of persistence. In any case, in 1969, Oak Ridge developed a new proposal. They wanted to build a new accelerator at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. In this accelerator, they wanted universities to get together and use that new facility. And they asked me to host a meeting, because I had been involved with a lot of Oak Ridge people, to host a meeting of universities in the Southeast, nuclear physicists, to join that proposal. And in doing so, I suggested that we together should buy an isotope separator and put it online with the accelerator in order to study nuclei well off the stability line that had never been seen or studied before. Well, it was austere times for DOE, and for that time it was called the Atomic Energy Commission. The Atomic Energy Commission didn't have much money and they turned down the proposal. But then I realized Oak Ridge already has an old cyclotron called ORIC, and we could take that magnetic isotope separator and use ORIC as the bombarding particle to make the new isotopes we wanted to study, and the separator to separate them. But also, since the times were hard, we were going to have to get together and buy that separator, because DOE wasn't going to buy it for us. And we will have to pledge a good fraction of the operating program for 5 years in order to make sure they would give us time to show good results. Well, I went to my dean and I asked him for $100,000, and I went to the chair and the dean and the provost and the chancellor at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I asked them for $100,000. Well, my dean said, nope, we don't have $100,000, but let's go to the provost and see if he has $100,000. Well, the provost said, nope, we don't have $100,000. If Joe needs a place to stay when they have in Oak Ridge to do research, we'll help him out in some other way, but we don't have money to put into a building program, and we don't have money to even to do other things. But they did have money. The dean did have $15,000 of money to put into the magnetic isotope separator, and he did pledge me $10,000 a year for the operating expenses, provided I could get something like 10 other universities in the Southeast to join me in pledging cost of the separator and operating money. Well, I got those universities to do so. Oftentimes when I would call up a dean and talk to him about giving $10,000 for the separator and $10,000 a year for the operation, he would say, why do I put money in Tennessee? I need it in Kentucky, or I need it in Louisiana. I said, well, if you want your nuclear physicists to dry up on the vine and have nothing important to do, you just keep doing what you're doing, because it's going to dry them up. But if you want them to be able to do forefront nuclear research, you put money into this isotope separator, and we will guarantee that you have access to forefront nuclear research for years to come. Well, we got together $90,000 for the separator, but the separator cost $160,000. We were about $70,000 short. And I didn't see any easy way to get that other money. Well, it turns out sometimes the harder you work, the luckier you get. And you may want to remember that one too. But in any case, I was a member of a group at my church of mid-career adults, one of whom was the chief assistant to the governor of the state of Tennessee. One of our annual monthly meetings, we met once a month for dinner and then had discussions. I presented this idea of buying a separator and putting it on the cyclotron at Oak Ridge and getting other universities involved with it, but we didn't have enough money. Well, after the meeting, he came to me and he said, Joe, I'm also the chair of the State Building Commission. He said, it sounds like this is a project the state ought to put some money into. Now, this is a part of reminding you that the next topic is to get your universities and political people to back you in what you want to do. So anyway, he said, why don't you send me a proposal to match your university contributions, another $90,000, and that'll get you over the hump and give you some more money to buy some other parts that you will need. So I presented a proposal to them, and they granted me the $90,000, and we ordered this isotope separator. from Denmark, and it was shipped. And in 1971, this is the ribbon cutting of my cutting the ribbon on the dedication of the new isotope separator. This is the control panel. The separator is back here. It goes through the wall. The ion beam comes into a target back behind this wall, strikes the target. The evaporation of the radioactive substances far from stability come out through the isotope separator, and they then are separated over here magnetically, one by one, to study. This group entails using people from the University of Tennessee, University of Massachusetts, Virginia Polytechnic and Institute, Georgia Tech, University of Alabama at Birmingham, University of Tennessee, Oak Ridge National Labs. My colleague A.V. Ramaya and I all together made use of this new isotope separator. The interesting feature is, you remember I said Oak Ridge was turned down on a proposal to build a new separator because it was very hard times financially in Washington. The director of Oak Ridge National Lab, Alvin Weinberg, said at the dedication of this system, "In days of austerity and the physical sciences, it is a particular pleasure to be able to point to a project that goes counter to the trend. UNISOR," which was the name of our organization, University Isotope Separator, Oak Ridge, is a remarkable not only for its sheer existence, because we put up so much money, DOE couldn't turn us down, but also for the extraordinary measure of cooperation between 10 institutions to get this project underway. So again, persistence does pay off in getting groups together and in getting money. Okay, the next slide. Okay, at this same time, in the middle 1970s, DOE decided they did want to build a new accelerator that would give off higher energies than what they had existing. And it turns out that Oak Ridge was selected as the choice of that because they could put a new 25 million volt tandem, a factor of 2 bigger than any tandem that had ever been built, with the Oak Ridge cyclotron as an injector to get up to the high energies they wanted to do. And because the cyclotron component was already there, this was a much cheaper, almost a factor of 2 cheaper than any other proposal. So Oak Ridge was selected. But in order to make sure that this project was used by scientists from around the country and around the world, it was to be a new concept in DOE policies. They appointed a heavy ion laboratory policy board. This was the membership in October 1, 1975. Alan Bromley, who later became the Bush's science advisor from Yale University, Harry Gold from the University of Rochester, Herman Grunder from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, myself from Vanderbilt, and John Unick from Argonne National Laboratory, and we had a couple of others added to that. These people were to ensure that the new national laboratory was used and could be used by people from around the country and around the world. In looking at that, I realized Oak Ridge National Laboratory is 10 miles from downtown Oak Ridge where the hotels are. If we wanted to have an efficient use of the new laboratory, we need housing, living space, dormitory space, a whole host of things, conference rooms, etc. We needed to have an institute next to the place where people could gather, talk about their research at nighttime, and not have to go this person to that hotel, this person to that room, but they could all gather and talk about what was important for the next day's work. Well, I conceived that we had to have a joint institute for heavy ion research in Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and that this would be an institute funded by Vanderbilt, University of Tennessee, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And again, this is going to be a great example of where persistence pays off. What's the next slide? Okay, this was the dedication of the Joint Institute for Heavy Ion Research, I will just comment on some things. This is the Oak Ridge representative of the Department of Energy at Oak Ridge. This is the representative from Washington. This is my chancellor at Vanderbilt. This is Glenn Seaborg, Nobel laureate in nuclear chemistry, who was the speaker, the director of Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the chancellor of UT Knoxville, and the president of the UT system. And this lady is the congressional representative from the House of Representatives who represents the Oak Ridge area, Marilyn Lloyd. And it was very important to cultivate her friendship because she later on is going to do something even more important than the Joint Institute for us. Well, in any case, I went to our dean and asked him for 100,000. I went to Jack Reese and asked him for 100,000. And I went to Oak Ridge National Laboratory and asked for 300,000. Well, I first wanted to get the Vanderbilt money in place before I really went to these two people to ask for more money. So I went to our dean and I asked him for $100,000. And he said, well, I don't have that kind of money, but let's ask the provost. He's got more money than I have. So we went to the provost, and the provost says, Vanderbilt doesn't have $100,000 to put in a Joint Institute building in Oak Ridge, but let's go to the chancellor and see what he says. Well, the chancellor, the dean and the provost and I went to the chancellor. The chancellor asked the provost what he thought of it. And the provost said, we don't have enough money to put $100,000 in a building to house housing and living space and so forth for visiting scientists for Oak Ridge National Laboratory. The chancellor, in his wisdom, said, you're right. We don't have $100,000 to do that. But this project is so important on a national scale for Vanderbilt to exercise its position at a national, international level that, Joe, if you get the other two people to put up their money, when you want our $100,000, I'll personally guarantee it. Persistence does pay off. And here is the dedication.
Joe?
Yeah.
Are you the guy, the little guy standing next to Alvin Weinberg?
This is me standing next to Glenn
Yeah,
Seaborg.
that's what I thought. A lot younger.
Yep, that's me, and all the rest of these people are taller than me.
Yep.
So don't be worried about height or whatever else. You
Okay.
may,
Good.
being persistence, you made me think of one other example of persistence. When I went away, when I was in high school, it was a small city, and essentially every boy had to go out for football and basketball and baseball for us to even have a team. Well, I went out for all three of those systems, and I wanted to be a center on the football team. Well, it turns out I was the smallest man on the line, but I wanted to play it, and I played it. And when I went away to college, I wanted to play football again, and I was again by far and above the smallest player on the line. But my persistence paid off. By the time I was a junior, I was the first string center on the team. And one of the guards said to me, Joe, I know when you block somebody, they stayed blocked. Well, the longest run in Mississippi college history was when at the start of the first play on the second half, we had a center block, center trap play, in which the center let the guard come through and then you trapped him and bumped him out of the way. We ran that center trap play. I knocked the guy out of the way in a big hole, and the fullback ran 90 yards for a touchdown on the opening play of the second half. Well, so much for that. But don't let size or intellect or anything else rob you of doing what you want to do. Okay, next slide. The next slide is the Joint Institute. This is our first building, which houses the room. It has 9 dormitory rooms. It has a lounge with a television set. It has a kitchen with facilities for cooking food, a refrigerator, kitchen table, etc. When you go into this room, there are small conference rooms. There are rooms for checking out your equipment. There are about 6 or 8 office spaces, including an office for the secretary we hired to manage the Institute and to handle all questions by visitors. And then there's a conference room at the very end, which houses about 100 people. we finally added a third room in here. The theorists, like Dashwan Feng, said, look, we're becoming an important element of the nuclear physics community at Oak Ridge. We need a building for us. And so I will talk about a little bit about how we got added the third building for the Joint Institute. At the dedication of the Hollyfield Heavy Ion Research Facility, this thing says, Edward Freeman, Director of the Oak Ridge Office of the Director of the Office of Energy Research at the U.S. Department of Energy, said, in basic science, we have two outstanding success stories: the University Isotope Separator at Oak Ridge, UNISOR, and the Joint Institute for Heavy Ion Research. So persistence pays off, and the Director of Energy Research at the Department of Energy complimented both of our projects as being outstanding examples for the whole department. Next slide. Okay.
Joe,
Yeah.
is there a cafeteria in this place?
No, you have to cook your. Oh, yes, there is a cafeteria. Excuse me. You can go over for lunch. And if you work, you can go for an early dinner at the cafeteria.
Okay, but that's important.
Yeah. But most people preferred cooking their own food for the dinner time.
Okay.
We had a refrigerator and stove and kitchen, everything there for kitchen. Okay. In 1969, in Scientific American, two distinguished theorists, Michel Barranger at MIT and Ray Sorensen at a Pittsburgh conference, put an article in the Scientific American about shapes and structure of nuclei. They said there's one class of nuclei that are spherical, and once you know that the energy levels in a nucleus, you can determine if it's spherical. There's another class of nuclei, like Modelson and Bohr had talked about, that are hard deformed, and they rotate and vibrate. And once you know the rotation and vibration spectra, you can know that's a hard deformed nuclei. And there's some squishy nuclei somewhere in between. But the joker is spherical and hard deformed nuclei. This is a quote from their paper: maintain their shapes throughout time. So if you have a spherical nucleus, it's got one shape. If you have a deformed nucleus, it's got another shape, and they maintain those shapes throughout time. Okay, the next slide. All right. Oak Ridge in the early 1970s had an older EN tandem that had about 8 MeV at the terminal. With that EN tandem, we studied the nucleus selenium-72. And what did we discover? Well, we discovered that the energy levels in selenium-72 started out as if it's a spherical vibrator, and then all of a sudden it makes a big sharp turn, and those energy levels are the energies of a well-deformed rotor. We had discovered that indeed selenium-72 had two distinct shapes. You can even find the other states that go above this. They're not plotted here. And then with the UNISOR separator at the same time, we discovered the light mass mercury isotopes do the same thing. The first two states are spherical, and then they quickly shift over to the deformed structures, and they have energy levels characteristic of the deformed structures. If you calculate the potential energy surface, which theorists do, for both selenium and for the mercurial isotopes, this is a calculation for selenium-72. You see that there are essentially two minimum. One is spherical, and this beta is a measure of the deformation of the nucleus. It's how, as your beta increases, the deformation elongates more and more. And if you look at the potential energy surface, there's two minimum. There's the minimum at 0 and an excited minimum very close to that minimum. And that's what generates this shape coexistence in the light mass selenium isotopes. Next slide. This is the mercury. We studied mercury 190, 188, 184, 182, and even 180. And what we see is there are a series of spherical vibrator states up to 8 plus. There are 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, up to the rotor model for the deformed structures. There are some structures that come in up here from single particle alignment problems. I'm not going to talk about those. What you want to see is these are the shape coexisting structures, the spherical vibrator and the deformed rotor. In 1976, I presented this results and the selenium results that you just saw at a conference in Russia, a nuclear structure conference that was hosted by the laboratory in Dubna. I had a 30-minute talk to talk about that. Normally, you get 5 minutes of discussion at the end of a talk. Well, something very unusual happened. The discussion went on longer than my talk. It went on for 30 minutes. There were people who said that can't absolutely have shape coexisting structures in the same nucleus. Berenger and Sorensen had already told us every nucleus has one fixed shape. A member of the National Academy of Sciences, a theorist, got up and said, "You can't possibly tell me nuclei as complex as these light mass mercury isotopes, so close with Z equal 80 to the spherical closed shell at 82, that they can have deformed structures like a prolate rotor as well as spherical structures." Well, my response to that was, I don't know what you want to call it, but here are the energy levels in these light mass mercury isotopes. If you go past here, they're all spherical. But as you go to 190 and down lighter nuclei, they have both spherical states and deformed shapes. Well, one of my Russian colleagues said to me afterwards, he said, well, one thing you can say, if you measured the most important talk at this conference by the amount of discussion it evoked, your paper won hands down. 30 minutes, nobody even came close to. Well, some people said afterwards to me, well, maybe it's an isolated phenomena. You just got lucky with the mercuries and the selenium isotopes. A theorist from Yale said to me 10 years later, he said, Joe, you can think that shape coexistence, most people said if it really was real, it probably was a couple of isolated regions like the mercuries and the seleniums, and you just accidentally hit them. Most people thought, well, it's not even the case. I don't know how you explain those data. In 1992, the chairman of that conference told me, sharing a little bit of how important shape coexistence was. He said, Joe, I nominated you for the Nobel Prize in Physics for your discovery of shape coexistence in complex nuclei. Well, in 2018, there was a major nuclear structure conference at Michigan State University. At the close of the conference, there was a summary speaker. The day of the summary speaker came to me and said, Joe, you must be very happy and very proud at this conference. I said, how so? He said, almost every talk at this conference with nuclei across the periodic table talked about shape coexistence in nuclei. You've changed the paradigm of what nuclear structure is like. Nuclei can have complete different shapes that give rise to different band structures that nobody had realized before. Okay, so another example. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, there is one other thing I wanted to show. Spherical shell model. I talked about the fact that this is the 28. This is a small gap at 40, 50, and then way up here is 82. These are the spherical shell gaps. But if you look at the calculations of theoretical microscopic models of Sven-Gösta Nielsen, you find there are other gaps out here with the circulars like we've seen, but they don't seem to have any importance. But if you look at the energy levels of the strontium isotopes, something very unusual is happening in the strontiums, which is 38. Well, if you go to 40 and 50, 40 and 50 give rise to very high energies that are characteristic of a spherical double magic nucleus. 40 and 56 40, and this shell gap at 56 again make rise to a double magic spherical nucleus. And then all of a sudden, at 38, which was more or less constant through here, the bottom drops out. The first excited state is way down here in the mud. Gradually, as you go up in Z, they all go up towards the Z equal 50 shell model states. But what has happened is the following. In 1985, we realized that what's happening to produce this, just as this unusual structure happens from the reinforcement of 50, of 40, and 86 in the shell model, spherical shell model. If you have a nucleus with 2 Z and N equal 38, that will drive a nucleus towards large deformation. And if you have strontium nuclei at Z equal 38 and N equal 56, you again drive a nucleus to strong deformation. So these shell gaps can be important if, in fact, you have both proton and neutron like 3838 having shell structure, having shell gaps at exactly the same deformation. The idea of reinforcing shell gaps. Okay, the next slide. I threw this one in because it's one that pleases me very much. In 1979-80, the federal government of Germany, the president of Germany, gave me an Alexander von Humboldt Prize worth some $35,000. That was a lot of money in 1979. Anyway, that prize allowed me to go to Germany to do experiments for a year. It turns out that I was just been appointed chairman of the physics department, and I couldn't be away 3 months. 12 months before, but what I worked out with the dean was I will go 3 months at a time to Germany and 1 month back to Vanderbilt. 3 months to Germany, 1 month to Vanderbilt. In the course of that, I brought along one of my recent PhD graduates, and we did some Coulomb excitation experiments in which we took a beam of lead at the new accelerator at GSI near Frankfurt, Germany, to bombard a curium target. I got the curium target from Oak Ridge National Laboratory and brought it over. They provided the beam of 208 lead, and we bombarded that in a lead prime, and we saw a rotational band structure that went all the way up to spin 30 to 28 right here. 28 to 26 is easily available. 30 to 26 you have to work at. But the interesting feature of this is they had been for 2 years trying to get lead beams bombarding lighter targets like lead itself and to see what they could see. And this was the first published paper in Physical Review Letters on heavy ion Coulomb excitation on an actinide target. And there, in 1980, there were 156 experiments done at GSI. Our results was the front cover of that book describing the 156 papers. So we made the front cover of the GSI yearbook for the year 1980 with our experiment. The next slide. Persistence does pay off. Okay. Now, another example of persistence and the importance of getting, already I've talked about the importance of getting your administrators on board, but it's also important to get your politicians on board. In late 1980s, the University of Rochester, out of scrap parts, they built an isotope separator with a magnetic device to do in-beam spectroscopy of isotopes produced and separated out with the separator. This was done at the University of Rochester. So we went up to join the Rochester group. They invited us up to do in-beam spectroscopy on these isotopes. My colleague Remaya spent a whole semester at Rochester doing in-beam spectroscopy. Well, I realized the importance of that device, and I decided You know, what we really need is a big device that will allow you to do heavy ions on light targets and to separate out those isotopes in a way that nobody else could do, and to measure a variety of problems. Well, we made a proposal to the Department of Energy. At the same time, Argonne National Laboratory took an older design of REMS, and they claimed for $1 million they could produce that older design at Argonne. Our new isotope separator was going to cost $4 million, 4 times as much money, because one, it was going to be so big, 90 feet long, while their other device just included this little magnet, well, this little magnet here, and one chamber here. So they didn't need a very big building to house their device, and it wasn't very much equipment. But anyway, we needed a new building, and we needed a 90-foot long recoil mass separator. I got Vanderbilt to pledge $150,000, UT, Idaho National Laboratory, the Unirib Consortium. We got up to about $900,000. But this device was going to be a lot bigger than that, because we had to spend a couple of $100,000 to build us a new building. So DOE funded the Argonne for $1 million and told us, sorry, you guys are too much money we don't have, and we can't build your device. So I had cultivated for a long time the senator from Nashville, who was also charge of the state building finance committee for the state of Tennessee. And I went to him and I said, we need to get another $500,000 to be able to build this brand new isotope separator that can do experiments that Argonne will never be able to touch. He said, well, let's go to the governor and see what he says. So the senator and I and UT, we went to the governor and we said, we've got $900,000, but we need the state to put in another $500,000 to be able to buy and build our isotope separator device. So after some lengthy proposals and discussions, the governor looked at his finance director and said, if I fund this thing for these guys, are you going to give me a hard time? His finance director said, the last time I looked, you were the governor. The governor says, okay, we built it. I won't tell you what he told the UT people about. Where in the hell did you get that $100,000? You people don't claim to have 2 dimes to rub together over there. But in any case, we called up and told the DOE that, and the next day they called me back and said, cease and desist, Joe. You can have the rest of your $400,000 to build your isotope separator. And we did do for 15 years experiments that nobody at Argonne could do. This is me. This is the Oak Ridge staffer at Unisor. This is my graduate student, and this is my postdoc taking our picture. These are the people who put this thing online and put it all together to do experiments. Next picture. Okay. I talked about forming groups. This is an interesting picture. By the time this picture was taken, there were 1, 2, 3 nuclear theorists and 1, 2, 3 experimental nuclear physicists. And we had invited, or I had invited Ben Models to come and give a special lecture series, which I had raised the money for, called the SLAC Lectures. And this has been with our now 6 faculty members. Professor Ramaya had joined me in 1964 as a postdoc, became a faculty member in 71 and a full professor in 81. And he worked with me for almost 60 years. And we've had a very long and illustrious career. I have done work with both Umar and Oberacher and Pinkston analyzing theoretical data. McGrath was hired for our group to do relativistic collisions, to do low energy collisions, and then decided to join and form a relativistic heavy ion group. What's the next slide look like? That may be the last one. Oh, this is 2 pictures to show you how you cultivate friendships. Here's a picture with Senator Henry. Bill Purcell, who just happened to be my nephew, at that time was the chair of the House Committee of the House of Representatives for the state of Tennessee. This is Joe Johnson, the UT president. This is a lady from Marilyn Lloyd's office, and this is the representative from, no, this is the representative from Senator Sasser's office. So we had representatives from the House, the Senate, the Tennessee Senate, and the Tennessee House. And this is the same picture with all those people talking about what we could do with all the money they had given us. Well, to illustrate how important getting to know people and to getting convincing them what they can do, that they can trust what you say. In the late, around 2000 or so, around 1995, DOE made a call for people to put up money to build a $20 million germanium ball with detectors all around in the germanium ball. 100 germanium, actually 110 germanium detectors completely surrounding the target. But they then said, we give you a month to get your proposal together, but we need you to, the successful proposal will depend on getting local support to support the device. Well, I got Vanderbilt and UT to agree to put up $100,000 towards that $20 million. I wanted to get $1 million of that $20 million locally. So I went to Senator Henry's office and I sat down and I described what the project was going to be and what it would be. And in fact, the detectors were going to be made in Oak Ridge National Laboratory, not at a commercial company for the laboratory. Anyway, Senator Henry became very interested in that. He had already been to Oak Ridge at these visits. He said, well, I like your project. He picked up his phone and he called up a man and he said, we need to get the governor to write a letter by Monday. This was on a Wednesday, to write a letter by Monday pledging $800,000 for a new project at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Can we get him to sign that? Okay, I'll send you Professor Hamilton over to work out the details with you. Clunk. I told my wife. I was just shocked. I went in to ask for $100,000 and walked out with $800,000 in my pocket. Well, we sent in our pledge for $1 million, and DOE decided if that kind of money is available from states to do this project, we need to build it. It's an important project, obviously. Well, it turns out Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory had a lot of pull in Washington and a lot of people in the lobbying department. We got the thing funded and they got the money for the whole project. So we didn't have to spend our $1 million. But in any case, we did it. When we needed a new wing for the theory wing, I got DOE, I got Vanderbilt to put up $50,000, UT to put up $50,000, Unisor to put up $50,000, and Senator Henry to put up $300,000 for the new theory wing on that score. Okay, is there another slide or is that the last one? I say all that, oh, that's a thank you, but let me give you one other bit of advice. The same person who got me to come to his building commission for the state of Tennessee and gave us $90,000 told me the following. He said, Joe, you're going to learn when you start asking around for money that at every level, at the city, at the state, at the national level, they always get a lot more proposals than they can possibly fund. And by and large, the things that they fund because they personally know the person who's asking for it, and they can trust his judgment, and they can trust what he says is important, and that he can do what he says he wants to do. And that was what the key to getting all those monies. So as a little boy out of Faraday, Louisiana, in the middle of the Depression, it's been an exciting tour. And your best wishes for your university to continue and to become an exciting scientific research university. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Professor Joseph's wonderful lecture. And now, okay. And now maybe it's our time to have some Q&A session. Does someone have some questions for this precious chance to communicate with Professor Joseph? Okay, maybe I will have this honor. Yeah. I have a question because I know something about I know that before this Zoom meeting, and you seem that you have another Zoom meeting before, and at that meeting, the William Purcell, your nephew, yeah, has shared something about you, and this context has been in one book named Science and Humanity: The Extraordinary Life of Joseph H. Hamilton. I see that. And I have one question, because in that the William said the Joe Hamilton came to know how to ask for public support and public funding. And from an early stage of his career, he understood exactly how to seek and receive the support that he needed to do the work we needed. So my question is that can I or may I know more skills of you to seek the public support from some institution to seek the public funding?
Well, my key to getting that public support was I invited Senator Henry down to my office at Vanderbilt and talked to him about what all I was doing, and took him over to Oak Ridge to let him see some of the things we were doing before I ever asked him for any money, so that he was aware of what I was doing and what I was trying to do. So you cultivate people's
Okay.
So let me give you one other example of cultivating. I mentioned that my nephew was the Speaker of the House of Representatives for the state of Tennessee. In 1996, he resigned that position to be the head of the committee for the state of Tennessee to re-elect Clinton and Gore as the president and vice president of the United States. And about this time, DOE had made a proposal for another project at Oak Ridge, a $2 billion project for studying biological physics and neutron physics and regular other physics. Well, they sent the proposal to DOE and nobody ever said a word. DOE never responded. We tried to find out what the Gore and Clinton thought about it. No word from them or anybody in Washington. Well, they knew that I had some contacts, that I had personally had some interactions with Vice President Gore. So they asked me, could I investigate with them what was going on? So I got my nephew and invited him to come talk with me. And I talked for about an hour with him, describe everything about what this new project would do and how important it was for the world of science. And he said, okay, Joe, he says, I'll try to get to Gore and see what he has to say. Well, 2 or 3 weeks later, he called me up and he said, Uncle Joe, I just got back from a trip with Al Gore from Nashville to Tullahoma to visit an institute down there. And for the whole hour of that ride, we talked about nothing but the spallation neutron source that Oak Ridge is proposing. And he said, I know that he understands what the physics is, and I know that he understands the importance of this goal. And to everybody's surprise, 2 weeks later, Al Gore was in Oak Ridge to say the Clinton-Gore administration is going to build this $2 billion new accelerator. And about shortly after it was completed, I took a group of high school students over there, and the man who was in charge of visitors to Oak Ridge National Lab. I came in late and was standing at the back. He stopped his talk and said, "I just want you students to know that man standing back there is the man responsible for the $2 billion accelerator being here today. He's the one who was responsible for getting the Gore administration off the hook and build our accelerator." So contact with the scientists before you ever ask them for $1 is important, to let them see your universities, to see what you're doing, to get a feeling for you as a person, to get a feeling for the enthusiasm you have for the science that you're doing or that you want to do. Okay? Does that help?
Yeah, that were it helps. And I saw another little story in his book. He said that small story when you are a child to the church, and it's the first time you ask in a public forum. And so I wonder if the be brave to express in the public should be a necessary element to ask public funding in forward days.
Well, again, getting the public interested in science is an important part of it. Because of my activity in a variety of ways, an important newscaster in Nashville had a 1-hour show every week on science, and she invited me to join her every week to talk about science and what I thought was important going on in science today and what I thought looked forward to in the future. And so for 2 or 3 years, we talked about all of that program. And again, it is important to let the public know what you're doing and get their support for those kinds of things. Also, it turned out she married a man from New York and moved up there after she had her talk show together. So we stopped that. But when she learned that I had been running a show for high school students and teachers, cost about $30,000 a summer for 3 weeks. She had a nephew who wanted to join the program, but we had run out of money. And so she said, "I'll give you the $30,000 if you'll run the program one more year and let my nephew come to it." So again, the harder you work, sometimes the luckier you get. But what the key was to convince her the importance of what we were doing and that she understood that importance and that our training was that important.
Okay.
I have given talks from everything from kindergarten to high schools all across Tennessee on that score, and to high school teachers. I ran a program for 12 years of inviting 30 students and 15 teachers to join our program for 3 weeks to let them see about do experiments in the labs at Vanderbilt and at Oak Ridge to get them interested in science and how science works. So, the other thing I did was back in 1988, the national labs did not have any programs to enlist high school students to understand what's going on in science at the national labs. I gave testimony to a group, to the House, Senate, and Committee on Science. Marilyn Lloyd, who was not on that committee, came in and said, "I hope y'all don't mind me sitting, but I want to hear what somebody from my state is saying about this." I told them they needed to put money into a program to bring high school students to various national laboratories for 3-week programs or even a month program to let them see what's going on in science and to participate in those things. And they did put the money behind it, and national labs since 1988 have had programs to bring high school students to enlist them. So you need at every level to try reaching out to people on that score.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Except your the six aspects you said in the post. I get it now that we need also to express outreach the influential aspects. Okay, thank you. And do we have another question? Oh, okay. We have another question from the Dr. Yiqiangdu.
Hello, Professor Hamilton. Thank you very much for your wonderful lecture and the research and the life experience you shared are truly invaluable to us. So my question is, you have a great number of international collaborators. In cross-border collaborations, do you ever encounter issues like cultural conflict? How do you handle such changes? Thank you.
I'm not sure I caught the full import of that question.
I'll tell you what he just said. He said, in all your international collaborations, how do you overcome cultural, maybe not conflicts, but cultural issues in making sure that things run smoothly?
Yeah.
Well, when we've had students from China, students from India, students from Sri Lanka, students from the Slovak Republic in Europe as graduate students to work with us. It is important. And one of the things I have learned many years ago was if you're going to go to a country, you need to learn a little bit of their language. One time I had learned, the first trip I made to Europe in 1959, we were driving around Europe and we drove into Yugoslavia and we had to be checked at the checkpoint for passports and so forth. And as they were doing that, I had learned the Yugoslavian word for thank you. And when we were going through it, I thanked the man in Yugoslavia, and well, his eyes just lit up, and we just went right through the project. Just 2 words. That's all I knew in Slavic language. But I have always tried to understand. And if I'm talking to the Russian people, I learned to say, "Меня очень приятно быть с вами." I'm very happy to be here today. And I learned the same thing in Chinese and other languages, just to be sure that they felt that I appreciated their culture as well. And the other thing is that, you know, my Chinese friends have allowed me to see a great deal of China. I have been everywhere in China, from Tibet to the Gobi Desert, to the Dunhuang back in the far interior caves, to see those, to Buddhist temples in central China, to go up the Yangtze River, to the 3 gorges of the Yangtze River before the dome, for the bridge was built, not the bridge, the dam was built over the Yangtze River. Part of that is that people feel good about you wanting to see something of what their country is like and to appreciate something of what their country is like. So in Russia, I have visited, I don't know how many different cities all across Russia to get a feeling for the people and the culture of those things. And so that's an important aspect of it.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have another question? And I have another question. As a faculty member of Hainan University, and I wonder, for Professor Joseph, do you have ever had a hard time in doing your research, feeling high pressure and how to balance your work and the task between these two.
Well, that's an interesting one. In that book, there is an interesting little story. One of my friends that I knew from church that I'm a member of got on a plane in New York City, and when he did, he sat down by a man who turned out to be a theoretical physicist, a distinguished theoretical physicist from the University of Tübingen in Germany. And they got to talking, and they realized that they both knew me. And finally, one of my friends from church said to him, "I'd like to know, Joe does so much physics, does so much church work, helping out people in housing projects and so forth. How does he have time to do much physics?" And my physics professor says, "He does so much physics, he doesn't have any time to do any church work."
I see this story. I see.
So my pastor of my current church, when he saw that book and started looking through it, he told me the next Sunday, he said, "How did you hold all of that in your brain?" I said, "Not easy, but it's fun to do a lot of different things. It keeps you sharp and keeps you mentally alert to all sorts of things."
Okay. Thank you for Professor Joseph. And from your window behind, it can be seen that the sky is getting darker and darker from the light blue to dark blue and totally black. And thank you for your time.
I have a question.
Okay, Professor Da Xuanfeng.
Yeah. Joe,
Yeah.
like everything else in life, what you achieve depends on your vision.
Mm-hmm.
And surely when you graduate from your college in Mississippi, the vision of what physics is, assuming at that time you're already interested in physics,
Yep.
what physics was at that time for you in your mind. And when you went to University of Indiana, you met people and you talked to different people, you heard many different colloquiums. Your scale sort of improved, as most people do. And as you go on in life, that gets bigger. Is that a natural progression for people, for all people, or sometimes some people just stop at certain level? And if they stop at certain level, what is the reason for that? You must have seen people just don't progress.
Yeah.
And even at faculty, you see some faculty just after a while don't progress.
Yeah.
How do you overcome this? This is, I think, very important for this university like Hainan, where all the young people, young faculties are gathering here, and they must be asking themselves, what is the scale I should be aiming for?
Well, one of the things that's important in that aspect of it to keep active in it, get not just by yourself, but get at least 2 faculty members together. Ramai and I together, we both inspired each other to do things that if either of us had been by ourselves, we wouldn't have gotten done. And so having somebody who is pushing on you and you push on them is an important aspect of keeping occupied all of the time. And the other aspect of it is to get a group of graduate students and postdocs who push on you. They will keep you busy and keep you occupied. Every year that I was a faculty member, in fact, my last graduate students graduated about 1 year before I retired at the age of 90. So I had graduate students pushing on me all the way to to my retirement on that score, and they still are pushing on me. I mean, In Hong Wong, he and we published 2 papers in Physical Review last month, and we just submitted 2 papers, one to PhysRev and one to PhysRev Letters this month. He keeps pushing on me, and I keep pushing on him to say, we got to get this other work done. So the combination of things, of who you work with, and you push on each other. That's, I think, a key to keeping on your toes all the time.
Very good.
Group support is terribly important.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for Professor Joseph Hamilton. And do we have other questions? If don't, okay, I'd like to extend heartfelt thanks to our speakers for your invaluable contributions and to each of you for joining us. Your presence has made this forum a valuable learning experience. And let's again give the warmest thanks to the Professor Joseph and Hamilton. And we also thanks for the Professor Dashan Feng to give this chance to have this wonderful lecture from Professor H. Hamilton.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate Dashwan inviting me very much. And I hope that this is giving encouragement to a lot of young faculty and a lot of graduate students. When I went to Indiana, I didn't know anything about physics research. And fortunately, I picked the best researcher and the best faculty member there at Indiana. He's the man who made the first measurement of the mass of the neutrino. When Konopinski and Uhlenbeck had given their forbidden theory of beta decay to go with Fermi's allowed theory of beta decay, he made the first measurement of the shapes of beta spectra to verify the Konopinski-Uhlenbeck theory of forbidden beta decay. So he knew what it was to pick really outstanding problems. The problem he gave me as a postdoc turned out to be, he wanted to see if this so-called Fiertz interference term played a thing on the shapes of, or if it really was present in nuclear beta decay. Well, it turns out it wasn't. And I got data that showed that the Fiertz interference term did not exist in beta decay. So I was fortunate in who I picked as a research director, and the advice he gave me of, don't be satisfied. You're going to have to publish papers. If you do graduate students, you're going to have to give them problems. And not all of the problems can be worth earth-shaking. They can be contributing to understanding what's going on. But make sure you get some problems that really change the way you look at the world.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again for Professor Joseph H. Hampton and Professor Dashan Feng. And now we may say that this forum can be over. Okay. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for all of the fun doing this thing.
Well,
Okay.
it's a great honor, Joe, to have you. I know it's late for you, but it's really a great honor.
Thank you.